Into the Sanity verse we go! Hey everybody, welcome to Sanity at the Movies, Spider-Verse edition. We are here to talk about, oh man, is it Into the Spider-Verse? No, the first one's Into the Spider-Verse.
Across
the Spider-Verse. And then it's not a spoiler to say that the third is Beyond the Spider-Verse, I guess. We're here to talk about it. A sequel to one of the episodes that I get the most, like, people say, I listened to that episode and had a thought about it from the past history of this show. Because that was where we premiered the whole ritual decoupled from meaning thing. And the forces of not me perhaps prevailed in that episode. I mean, I guess we did 2 episodes. At least that's the consensus that I get, is people are like, Nathan, why'd you want to bring your argument to that movie? And I don't know. You can just go back and listen to it. It's interesting. If you want to hear ritual decoupled from meaning, the classic Sanity at the Movies essay, you go back and you listen to Spider-Verse 2, I think, actually. It's like the second episode on the first Spider-Verse movie. But now, perhaps we'll dust off the old gloves and talk about it again, or maybe we won't. I don't know. It's Spider-Verse. It's the second Spider-Verse movie, the most hotly anticipated movie of the summer for most people, for the people in this room.
For me.
For Jake, certainly. And I don't think it was exactly what any of us were expecting. I don't know. We'll get to it. My name is Nathan. I'm your humble and obedient host. We've got Benjamin, the preacher, who's a teacher of spider stuff.
That's right.
And Ben, we've already heard him talk.
We have.
But you still have the privilege of introducing him.
I do. It's Pastor Jake Menzel. He's the pastor who's a master of the Spider-Verse.
Hey, what's up?
Welcome, gentlemen. So, just to recap, what's the thing they always do in these movies? Well, like every time a new character is introduced.
Let's try this one more time, except I just botched it. That's not what it is.
Something like that, yeah.
Help Jake. Jake knows, right?
That's kind of what they do, yeah.
Okay, all right.
So let's try this one more time. Jake was really excited to see this movie. He thought it'd be the best movie this summer. Ben, where did you rank it in our episode?
I can't remember. I was excited. I think I was more excited about Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yeah, I think maybe I was too.
Maybe I might have put this below Flash even. I feel like I didn't do that, but I'd have to go back and look.
It feels like something you would do.
It does.
Just like,
au
contraire, my dear fellows.
Quite the contrary, man.
But Jake was obviously excited about this one.
Yeah.
And by the time I walked into the theater, was very excited about this one. I was trying not to be too excited about this one because I thought there's no way it's going to
live up to the hype.
But by the time I walked into the IMAX theater, sitting in
you saw it in IMAX.
IMAX seat D14, I think, the movie enveloping me on every side, which was actually not a very good way to watch this movie at all, because
it's too busy, right?
It was too busy. I literally could not read the subtitles because I would have to crane my neck and they would disappear before the little...
That was true in a normal theater. They were popping out. Like when they threw up panels in the bottom right, little explainer panels, they were gone before you knew it.
Well, this movie will actually play better in that sense on a small screen. Like on your laptop, you'll be able to absorb a lot more of this information a lot quicker, or at least I will, the way my brain works. Because I'm used to watching YouTube videos and things that move that fast. But
yeah, well, it's just going to be one of those, it's just so visually packed, which, I mean, points in its favor.
Yes, absolutely. I also felt like actually sitting that close in IMAX, and I like to sit close to the screen. I'm not like a idiot that sits in the first row and breaks his neck looking up. I'm not that guy. I don't know who is, but I'm also not. I find most of the time when I go with my friends, they're like, "Oh, let's sit in row G or H. That's where I like to sit." That's the average film goer that accompanies me to the films. But I'm more of like a D or an E kind of a guy. But so I like to sit close to the screen and have it envelop me and stuff like that. I enjoy it. A proper IMAX experience. I enjoy like a proper museum IMAX experience where there's literal, it's all your peripheral vision is entirely absorbed.
Just go watch a shark movie or a deep space movie or something like that.
Here comes the waters of the ocean. I had the privilege of watching a documentary on Hollywood special effects that was made for a museum. I think it was the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry many, many years ago.
Sounds like fun.
And so you saw scenes from Independence Day and stuff like that. And it was awesome. It was like 30 minutes or something like that. But
Yeah, I still have really strong memories of doing that sort of thing as a kid and just being wowed by not that one in particular. It was like the shark or whale thing
Right.
or whatever it was and stuff like that. But yeah, man, those are so cool.
no, it's really cool if you're just, one of those, you're on Everest or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just, you
Those
just
are
feel like you're
awesome.
there, and you actually, if you're me at least, you're lame enough that you're like holding on to your seat so you don't fall over the cliff. It's really enveloping. I like that stuff. And I actually thought that that's what IMAX was until I saw The Matrix Reloaded in IMAX. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be that enveloping. And then it was just like a big screen and giant close-ups of the pockmarks on Lawrence Fisher's face, which was its own kind of magic. But in any case, I think this was the wrong movie for that. I actually think one of the worlds suffered from it, namely Miles's home planet, what universe is that called? Do either one of you nerds know?
No.
The art style, the backgrounds are all just very abstracted, like they're
Yeah.
intentionally
Blurry
sort of blurred.
And
And they were so in my face that I was just like, this looks bad. I don't like this. And that may have actually contributed, just honesty and reporting here, that may have contributed to some of the problems that I had with that chunk of the movie, which was the chunk of the movie that I sort of had entertainment problems with. I had some sort of broader cultural, whatever, spiritual problems maybe with the movie, but also just there was one part where I was less engaged than the other part, and it was that part. And I think some of it may have just been like, is this out of focus? Am I seeing a 3D movie and they forgot to give me the glasses? Like, it just kind of had that weird feeling. And then as soon as you got to India or some of the other stops along the way in the multiverse, it did not feel like that at all. And Gwen's amazing opening scene did not feel like that at all. So
No.
I was like worried for some of the movie and distracted. Is this what it's supposed to look like? And then I went and found screen grabs and stuff when I got home, and yep, that's just what it's supposed to look like. But I don't remember Spider-Verse 1.
It wasn't so. There is a different visual quality. I haven't gone and compared them, but memory.
no, I thought it was very much the same.
Did you?
Was that sort of pointillism, the dots on their faces?
Yeah.
That was all.
That was all there.
That I remember. It's just the backgrounds. A couple of times I was like, should I have on 3D glasses for this? Is that the deal?
In part 1.
No, in this one.
In this one, yeah. Well, specifically the scene.
I'm probably just misremembering.
The lovely scene where they're upside down and they have their little romantic kind of.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, but it didn't feel as gorgeous as I thought it was supposed to, just because the background was all.
I didn't mind that. Anyway,
I was pretty taken with that.
Yeah,
so.
I was too. I think maybe all I'm saying is D-Row IMAX was not the way to experience Miles's home world. But a lot of the other stuff was pretty cool. So, and the folks, most of them teenagers that I saw with the movie, certainly enjoyed it. So, quick recap: we all love Spider-Verse 1. True.
Yeah.
And
Although the we all part,
well, Jake, I've been cast as the Spider-Verse 1 hater simply for
hating it.
daring to question it, daring to not bow the knee to the golden idol.
as I recall, what we left off was all, even Jake acknowledged, this is my memory, acknowledging your point that there's something more abstract than just a good dad movie at the emotional core of Spider-Verse 1. That it is like a create your own reality, or at least that's an open question.
Yeah, I think it's an open question.
Yes. Jake made a very plausible argument, which people come up to me to this day and say, yeah, Jake got you on that. So yeah, obviously it was plausible for most of our
People
listeners.
come up to me and say, yeah, you were right.
Yeah. History will prove me right. And this movie is beginning to prove me right, I think. But
I don't know.
We'll
see.
Yeah, we'll talk about
That's
it.
how I feel, but we'll talk about it.
No, I would put money on it. This is the end of civilization, gentlemen. But it was an enjoyable movie. So, all right. Do we have context for this one, Ben?
Yeah, we have do you want context? I've got context.
Yeah, I mean, I know people want our takes, so
Well,
we can't do like an hour of context. Or
Why don't we just delay our takes and make them wait? They have to hear about the history of Marvel Comics, which is fun. We did a history of DC Comics for Superman. I've got a little history of Marvel, which I think is kind of fun for Spider-Man.
Okay.
It's not terribly long. All right. Ready?
Wait, we should give him a teaser, though. We should.
A teaser. Okay.
So sum up this movie in one word, Ben.
Trans.
Sum up this movie in one word, Jake.
Unfinished.
Sum up this movie in one word, Nathan. Complicated. Okay, there we go.
Wow.
That's a cliffhanger.
Okay. Marvel Comics. All right, here we go. Marvel Comics started out as Timely Comics in 1939. It's the comic book arm of this dude's publishing company, a dude named Martin Goodman. Guess what? He was Jewish. It's shocking, given what we've talked about before. He published Pulp Fiction and men's adventure magazines. Yes, comic books. Marvel Comics, #1 in 1939. I'm not going to do the silly thing, the annoying silly thing I did last time. This, you guys can guess. It featured the first appearance of, it's unlikely you know who. Anyone want to guess? If you get this, I would be amazed. You'd be an actual comic book nerd. You'd reveal yourself right now.
Is it Mr. Marvel or something like that?
No, it's the Human Torch, but it's not that Human Torch. It's the first one. He was an android. It's complicated.
By the way, I should say,
yeah,
the chronology, we are in our own version of the Spider-Verse here because people won't have heard that Superman episode.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm out of order here. Okay, so one thing that we're going to be talking about in the future is how all of our entertainment comes from those of Jewish descent. All of our modern entertainment, including comic books, including like pulp publishing, all this stuff, all the guys who invented our favorite comic book characters and made the industry run, they are Jewish.
Which is something that they'd be happy to own and something that we'd be happy for them to own.
Sure.
That's not like a conspiracy,
conservative
conspiracy
It's
theory.
reality.
It's just reality.
Yeah, it's just the reality. So, there's also, you won't guess this guy either, but another superhero appears as a villain in this comic book, and he actually recently came to life in what I will very sarcastically call the greatest superhero movie of all time. Can you guess what character it might be? He was a villain in a Marvel movie just recently.
A bad one, I take it?
Yeah, that none of us has seen, I think.
No.
Is it an MCU movie?
Yeah.
Quantumania?
No. That's a good guess, though.
What are the bad?
It's Namor, the Submariner from Black Panther 2,
Ooh, okay.
Wakanda Forever.
Yeah.
That's right.
Crazy that we didn't even feel the need to see that. But.
I know. So Martin Goodman was doing this comic thing to test the superhero thing to test the market. I think he obviously wanted to see if he could imitate the crazy success DC had just a year before with their 1938 revelation of Superman in Action Comics #1. So what do you know? Marvel Comics #1 sells out. 80,000 copies. Goodman is, yes, I've got a hit. Comic books are going to work for us. He does a second printing. It sells 800,000 copies. Just like that, Timely Comics is, they're on the road. So 1941, they published their third major character. This one you guys might actually be able to guess. It's not Spider-Man, but it's another very important MCU character. Brainchild of one of the greatest, this is 1941, brainchild of one of the greatest,
Captain
most important,
America.
yeah, there you go. Most important comic book artists, writers of all time. Do you know the name of this guy? Nathan, you might.
It's not Stanley. It's
the
artist guy.
Yeah.
Is it Kirby?
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
Very good. Jack Kirby. We'll talk more about him. He's interesting. Captain America, very successful. Hits the shelves during World War II. He starts out, of course, as a super soldier fighting the Nazis. The famous cover of his first book is him punching a very distressed Hitler in the face.
Hitler didn't like that, huh?
Hitler didn't like that. Jack Kirby, what a shock. He was born Jacob Kurtzberg. Turns out he's Jewish. So Kirby's hired on staff at Timely Comics. He doesn't stay very long, but he'll be coming back. Around the same time, Martin Goodman hired his wife's cousin, also a Jew, and this guy has a catchphrase. Very famous. You just said his name.
Excelsior!
There you go. It's Stan Lee. He'll be a mainstay of Timely or Marvel. Creator of Spider-Man, hired 1941. So now, just like DC Comics is doing, Timely Comics is putting out comics about everything. Westerns.
He started working in 1941.
Yeah.
And he just died, like, we just used up his last appearances. So he was he was like going on 100, or he was 100.
Something like that. I didn't look up his age at time of
I knew
death.
he was old, but I never clocked.
Yeah, he's, man.
Assuming he was older than 20 when he began working at Timely, whatever.
I think he was actually younger than 20, if memory serves. You could look that up, but I didn't record his age. So yeah, he comes into the comics biz. All kinds of comics are coming out. Westerns, horror, kaiju monsters, romance, and a few superheroes.
22 to 18.
Okay, so
yeah, there you
just
go.
shy of
Died at age 95.
Died at age 95. Yeah.
Centenarian?
Just a month before his 96th birthday.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah. Well, he had some staying power.
Yep. Didn't look a day over.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So, and we should remember what we mentioned several times on this podcast. Then, as now, comic books, they're the cutting edge of violence, of lurid content. Yeah, lots of fun stories, sure. But they got the violence. They got the buxom babes. They've got everything's in pictures. The teenage boys are devouring this stuff. Martin Goodman, these men's adventure magazines. This is a genre of magazines that was popular from the 40s to the 70s. Well, what were these things? Well, there were some adventure stories. They were like the pulpiest kind. Fiction, some quote-unquote nonfiction stories about war, all amped up. Jungle trips, fights with wild animals, and pinup photos. Nude or nearly nude stuff. And these things, they either morph into porn magazines or they're just the precursor to porn magazines.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be familiar with the iconography. Like it would be like a painted, almost Norman Rockwell-like image. There'd be like a lady in negligee. She's tied up. There's a mad Nazi doctor or something. And then there's like a sort of two-fisted Indiana Jones type.
Fighting a leopard. In the
Fighting a leopard. Yeah, well, I mean, that we probably just described without exaggeration something. That...
We probably did. I mean, that probably exists. So this is your friendly sound of sanity reminder that pulp stories and comic books, considered as an industry, as a storytelling medium, they're highly correlated with the porn industry and pornographic content. And I think that's natural given the way that visual storytelling leads our sensibilities. It's always the edgiest and the most sentimental and the most shocking and the most colorful stuff. It's a recipe for producing a lot of trash. So there you go. You're welcome. On that note, back to the history of Marvel. 1950s timely rebrands to Atlas Comics. And due to competition with TV shows, the comics industry starts going downhill. And they're like, we're done with superhero stuff. We'll keep publishing other kinds of comics. Maybe we should just shut the comics division down, actually. But our hero, not Stan Lee, but our hero, Jack Kirby, comes back in 1958. He's going to stay until 1970. And during this time, Atlas as a whole is going to become really successful. And starting in 1961, they're going to make superhero comics really successful again. 1961 is when the Marvel branding just takes over. Mm-hmm. So during this time, Jack Kirby is the guy who creates a ton of the Marvel stuff that you know and love, or at least you know. And you may have seen it in MCU movies. So X-Men, Hulk, Iron Man, Ant-Man, Thor, Black Panther, Silver Surfer, Groot, the Fantastic Four. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby fought over who should get credit for the Fantastic Four. Stan Lee, of course, is also this dynamic creative force whose work as a writer and editor helps make Marvel successful, especially their superhero stuff. And hey, so before we keep going, speaking of Fantastic Four, no one today cares. And none of us here probably likes it. But that's because all we've been exposed to is the movie adaptations, which are hot garbage. It was Marvel's first team superhero comic. The idea was to imitate DC's Justice League, which was pretty successful. People love Fantastic Four. Why? Well, and it was so successful that it actually convinced Stan Lee not to leave the comics industry, which he was considering at the time. Why? So Stan Lee and Jack Kirby very famously came up with a new flavor for superheroes, which feeds directly into Spider-Man, which is this. Superheroes can have money problems and marriage problems and behave like ordinary people who happen to have special powers and have to deal with supervillains. So this is pre-Spider-Man. Fantastic Four cracks this formula. And Kirby also was an awesome artist. He was experimental with panel layouts. He was experimental with visual effects. He has this famous way of drawing energy fields called the Kirby crackle. You've probably seen somewhere.
You know Jack Kirby's style.
Yeah,
that's what it's called. Or
as soon as you know who he is, you connect the dots if you've read any comics, any older comics at all. And Kirby loved these big, like, cosmic stories. So the Fantastic Four would have, in addition to marriage problems, they'd have cosmic adventures, like the one with Galactus, the world-devouring entity who wants to eat the Earth, which is considered one of the greatest superhero stories ever. I've been very tempted reading about Kirby to go back and read it. All the early Fantastic Four stuff is considered classic by comic books nerds. Like, it just pushes storytelling. So maybe someday they'll make a decent movie out of it. I don't know. Stan Lee, anyway, was firing on all cylinders. Jack Kirby's firing on all cylinders. Right? What in the world is the problem with this?
No, they did.
What? Oh, sorry. I thought you were saying the solution is to just cast it correctly. I don't know what the casting is.
They did just cast it.
Yeah, let's...
Is it a bunch of...
What's his name for Mr. Fantastic or not?
Let me pull it up. Adam Driver.
For Mr. Fantastic?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Margot Robbie.
This is leaked, alleged?
I think these are leaked all but confirmed.
David Diggs, all right. Our good friend as Ben Grimm, and Paul Mescal as Johnny
Paul
Storm.
Mescal, yep.
Who? Who's that? I don't know who that is.
You'd recognize his face. He's an up-and-comer. He's going to be in the new Gladiator and stuff like that.
Well, that could make it work, but if it's going to be an MCU movie, I don't know. So, all right. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby are awesome together. Here's a quote from a comics historian named Charles Hatfield. About Charles Hatfield about various collaborations they did. So, quote, offsetting the formulaic nature of the stories was a dash of invigorating absurdity. The tales had Kirby's energy and courtesy of Lee, confessional first-person titles typical of sensation-mongering tabloids and comics, such as, I created Spore, the thing that could not die, unquote.
Man. Confess!
So Stan Lee creates Spider-Man in 1962. And he creates him with another famous comic book artist named Steve Ditko. Everyone's favorite web crawler appears in Amazing Fantasy number 15. Jack Kirby does the cover. He does not draw the comic because Stan Lee thought that Kirby's style made Spider-Man look too heroic, at least some early version of Spider-Man that he was trying to figure out. Like we've said before, Spider-Man is the epitome of the ordinary guy with extraordinary powers that Marvel learned to cash in on. And it sells right away. It's really popular. He gets his own comic book line, Amazing Spider-Man, which is still around. In 1965, the magazine Esquire did a poll of college students to find their top revolutionary icons, and they picked Che Guevara, Bob Dylan, and Spider-Man. One of the students said, he is beset by woes, money problems, and the questions of existence. In short, he is one of us. Everyone feels that way about Spider-Man. He taps into this existential angst of awkward teenagers. He's one of us. And Stan Lee did that on purpose. Somewhere, by the way, just this was odd, further down on the same list was the Hulk, of all things. So here's another quote about the Marvel secret recipe from a writer. Quote, Superman in DC Comics instantly seemed like boring old Pat Boone. Marvel felt like the Beatles in the British invasion. It was Kirby's artwork with its tension and psychedelia that made it perfect for the times. Or was it Lee's bravado and melodrama, which was somehow insecure and brash at the same time, unquote. Influence for Spider-Man, it included the pulp novel hero, the Spider, not to be confused with the later British comic book anti-hero, the Spider. The Spider was a masked crime fighter, is not a superhero. He had a few things in common with Spider-Man. He was a vigilante. He was opposed by criminals and by the law, like at least early Spider-Man was. He had a kind of sixth sense that he developed through practice, kind of like Spider-Man's spider sense. And he had his web, this thin rope. All right, you can find some old serials of the Spider. If you look, you can find clips on YouTube. I did. And, oh, by the way, the reason there's a hyphen in the name Spider-Man was to just differentiate the name visually from Superman, give people something. So Jack Kirby has made some claims, or he did before he died, that Stan Lee didn't create Spider-Man. Kirby did, along with the writer Joe Simon. And Simon claimed the same. But this stuff is really hard to substantiate. From what I can tell, yeah, Stan Lee basically created Spider-Man with Steve Ditko. They sort of share credit. This Ditko came up with web shooters, the red and blue costume. He was like, it should cover Spider-Man's face. That will let people imagine that they're Spider-Man. So they share credit. A little bit more about Jack Kirby, who's just an interesting dude. In 1970, he went to Marvel. He left Marvel to go to DC for 5 years. He was angry that he didn't have the creative control he wanted, which this is a theme you're going to hear when you hear our Superman episode and you hear about Siegel and Schuster. Some of the same things are like, we didn't get enough credit, and these guys are all like this. So he didn't have the creative control he wanted. He was angry at Stan Lee's pride of place in the company and the public eye. Stan Lee was really good at self-promotion. He was angry. He hadn't been given the credit.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
He will write himself into, he'll be like, hey, fans, it's your buddy Stan. Like,
that's right.
That's a caption in a comic book.
Yeah.
Stan Lee just promoted himself within the pages of Marvel. He's
great at that, and he had the right position in Marvel to do that. And Kirby is just an artist anyway. So Stan Lee is well known, and Kirby's like, I should be given more credit for creating this giant stable of superheroes. So he goes to DC. He develops some weird and mythic stuff that we don't really care about, like the New Gods and Mr. Miracle, the Forever People. The one thing that you might know from this run is the villain Darkseid, because he's one of the New Gods. He makes an appearance as the big big bad behind the scenes in Zack Snyder's Justice League. And all that kind of stuff, like the cosmic stuff, the mythologizing, that's what Kirby was into. That's what he got him going. Here's a couple of evaluations of his work I found on his Wikipedia page to give you the flavor. Kirby's mix of slang and myth, science fiction, and the Bible made for a heady brew, but the scope of his vision has endured, or like the comics writer Grant Morrison said, Kirby's dramas were staged across Jungian vistas of raw symbol and storm. The Fourth World Saga crackles with the voltage of Jack Kirby's boundless imagination let loose onto paper. All right, it kind of makes me want to go look at it.
Well,
the Fourth World stuff.
Definitely the forebearer of Spider-Verse, of things that are happening in comic book movies now, things that we couldn't have gotten to in the 90s or early 2000s because people weren't ready for that level of metatextual analysis, that level of cosmic world building. Like he gives it a myth, and that's not something that your average pedestrian would have associated with comics until now.
No, that's true. He also, when he came back to Marvel, he created Eternals and Celestials, which formed the basis for a truly terrible Marvel movie. I'm sure his original comics are at least interesting. So in Marvel, back to Marvel, late 60s, Martin Goodman sells Marvel. It continues to act as a publisher. In the early 70s, Stan Lee takes over publishing, editing. He's Marvel's president for a little bit. The 70s, the market for the comic books is just in flux in general. Comics are having a hard time. They've been relying on sales at newsstands. Newsstand distribution is not doing so well. That's where you buy the comics and then whatever you don't sell, you return for a refund. And comic book publishers are like, this is not working. So they start doing direct sales where it's just like the comic book store buys the comic. And if you're stuck with it, if it doesn't sell, but maybe you're going to hold on to it until people are interested and sell it for more money later. So the whole market, the way that they do things is changing. And just briefly, let's jump to the 90s, which is a bunch of my childhood and adolescent years. The 90s is where you get these more ambitious animated shows about the X-Men or Spider-Man. There's been a bunch of versions of Spider-Man, especially before. And by now, in the 2020s, wherever we are, there's been 1 million animated versions of Spider-Man. Some of them really good quality from the little that I've seen. Marvel's trying to branch out into other. They partner with the Christian publisher Thomas Nelson to make Christian comics. They do a comic book of the sentimental Christian novel In His Steps. I've read it. I think I might have used to own it. I maybe even have read that novel. Oh my goodness. They create a Christian superhero called the Illuminator, which had a total of 3 issues before dying. I own 2 of them. I would have loved to have the 3rd. It's about a teenager who gets hit with a beam of light, and before you know it, he's using his powers of light to fight demon-possessed psychopaths and stuff like that. It's really, really violent and gross. Pretty sure it has nothing to do with Christianity. I read my 2 issues over and over again. Anyway, the comic book industry really slumps in the mid and late 90s. Marvel has become Marvel Entertainment Group, but it files for bankruptcy in 1996. They're bought by Toy Biz the next year, and they become Marvel Enterprises. And this is the era where Avi Arad, if you know his name, becomes the chief creative officer of Marvel Entertainment, and he founds Marvel Studios. And he is, yes, that's right, he's Jewish. He's Israeli-American. What can I say? And under his leadership, Marvel stabilizes. It becomes financially viable. They start optioning film rights. Even Men in Black was from a comic book that was part of an imprint owned by Marvel. Blade, the X-Men, all this early stuff. And then Disney buys Marvel in 2009. And that brings us to the present day of not so great movies in the MCU as they've gone along. And a day where Marvel is the current comic book sales leader over DC by a significant percentage of sales, except of course, manga is outselling them both. There's a lot more we could say about how Marvel actually makes its money, a lot more details about the comics industry and the times that Marvel almost failed or collapsed. But suffice to say that most superheroes these days are financially successful not through comics, but through branding and through merchandising.
I mean, I know kids that read manga, that buy it.
Yeah.
Do any of us know a child that reads not even graphic novels, but comic books?
No.
You just don't see that.
You
barely saw it when we were kids, but you really don't see it now.
No. One more word
the market
about
just aged up.
Yeah.
It never aged out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's
true.
the market for for comic books.
Yeah.
They're like, because of Spider-Verse, I have all of these Spider-Man comic book stuff showing up in my Twitter feed and whatever else for me.
Yeah.
And I couldn't care less.
Yeah, it's all millennial. It's like it's the stupid Simpsons character, the comic book guy or whatever. It's that guy. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think the last thing to say is that Spider-Man is very a lucrative property, obviously. But so in 2014, it was earning $1.3 billion a year through its licensed product. And that's the most of any superhero. I mean, at the same time as Spider-Man was getting $1.3 billion, the Avengers were getting $325 million, Batman $494 million, Superman $277 million. Spider-Man's revenue is more than all those heroes combined. Even though Batman, for instance, will reliably place ahead of Spider-Man on polls for the greatest superhero of all time. Sometimes Superman will, but not always. And then there's one other hero I saw, this is the last thing, who places ahead of Spider-Man regularly. I say regularly, I looked at 4 or 5 big polls. So I wonder if you guys could guess who it is. What superhero?
So Superman and Batman are already out?
Yeah, not them.
Iron Man.
No.
It's an MCU guy?
Yeah.
Hulk?
He's the best he is at what he does, and what he does isn't pretty.
Oh, the Punisher? No.
Wolverine.
There you go.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Man, society is lame.
Wolverine's awesome. What are you talking about, Nathan?
Wolverine's so lame. Wolverine's always been lame.
I love Wolverine.
Ooh, it's Dirty Harry, but with claws. That's what we need. That's what the world needed.
I love Wolverine.
He smokes a cigar. He calls people bub.
He has a tragic backstory. That's better than Dirty Harry. He has a heart of gold underneath his rough exterior.
It's rough exterior.
Just like everybody else.
Well, he's the best. He is at what he does. He's the best stereotypical thing that he is.
Anti-hero.
Yeah.
Classic American tragic anti-hero.
Yeah, he is. He's one of the coolest.
He's a Western. He's a cowboy throwback.
I wish that
he
had
Harrison
better
Ford
movies to be
character.
in. Yeah, absolutely. He's all that.
I like.
He's all that in a
Hugh
bag of chips.
Jackman, but
Oh well,
is that everything?
that's everything.
Well, I can talk us through Spider-Man movie stuff real quick. Just
All right.
So, Marvel actually sold Spider-Man to Canon, the dumb producer of Chuck Norris action movies, in 1985, and then the rights. Like, this is how low Marvel was, like, and how little sort of belief they had in these properties, and how little sort of cultural cachet and artistic value people were putting on them. It's like, can we make a little bit of money by selling the rights to a B movie studio? And then the rights jumped around, and it came down to a complex legal web between MGM, who ended up with the rights from Canon, and Columbia, who was owned by Sony at the time, who just bought the character outright from Marvel in 1999. It's weird. You can sell like different pieces of the character. We've all seen this with the negotiations between Disney and Sony. It's like, these people over here own action figures. These people over here own the books. These people over here own the iconography. It's like, it's all so complicated. So basically, Spider-Man got bandied around. You can find a lot of fun, almost Spider-Verse things, some universes that we didn't get. You can find James Cameron's dark screenplay for Spider-Man written in the 80s. Like, everybody was trying to figure out how to make this character work. But basically, it came down to Columbia and MGM around the turn of the millennium are trying to get this figured out. And James Bond, I think I said this on the first Spider-Verse episode, but James Bond is the man who saved Spider-Man, because basically, I'm going to confuse which studio was which, but MGM, they both had the rights to James Bond and they both had the rights to Spider-Man, basically. And so it was like, we can both just be mutually destroyed, or one of us can take James Bond and one of us can take Spider-Man. And they worked it out. And so we got that wonderful run we got the last, what's his face movie? We got Die Another Day with Pierce Brosnan. And then we've got the Daniel Craig movies that came out of that. And eventually it led to the James Bond people getting the rights back to Spectre and Blofeld and all that sort of thing. So James Bond became what James Bond became. And meanwhile, Sony had the rights to Spider-Man, and they got Sam Raimi, fun indie director, to make the first movie that had $100 million weekend, and won the best kiss at the MTV Movie Awards. And so it should have. It's a great kiss. And introduced Spider-Man to a broader public. And then Spider-Man 2 rocked everybody's world. And then Spider-Man 3 came out in 2007. The studio was like, we got to put in Venom. It's what the fanboys want. Let's ruin this. And they ruined it. And Sam Raimi was so demoralized by that, he couldn't get it together in time for Spider-Man 4. Sony has, I think it's important to know that Sony, their deal to this day is that they have a 5-year window in which to make another Spider-Man movie. If they ever go 5 years without making a Spider-Man movie, they lose the rights.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
And so that's why, like when Garfield was cast, everybody was like, what? You're already, now it feels like, oh, whatever. There's a new Batman every day. This is what we do. These characters we can't let go of this.
Yeah, but I
IP.
remember feeling that.
Yeah, it was like,
Me too.
You're going to retell.
What in the world?
Yeah.
We're just restarting that this quickly?
It
And we have another origin story where Uncle Ben has to die again?
It felt borderline insulting. Yeah. But yeah, in any case, the rights will revert fully back to Marvel if Sony ever does not meet that production window, which explains why we have an animated Spider-Man over here and a Tom Holland Spider-Man over here and the Garfield stuff. And yes, I think that is most of what you need to know about cinematic Spider-Man. Miles Morales was created as late as 2011 by Brian Michael Bendis, a author of comics. I don't know what to say.
Can I say he wrote the Ultimate Spider-Man, which was every Marvel sort of, I won't say rebooted, but they created an alternate version of their own universe in an alternate line of comics without stopping the old universe from running, called the Ultimate Universe.
Right.
So Ultimate Spider-Man is actually, at least for probably 70 issues or so, is awesome.
Yes, I know people love
It's
that.
fantastic. It's so much fun. It's like I read and absorbed all the Spider-Man and all the different continuities for like 50 years. Now here's this. It is super fun. The art is great. It doesn't do everything right, but man, what a fun comic. If you like Spider-Man.
And Miles Morales is actually a very cynical creation. Obama was about to be president in 2008, and Marvel's then editor-in-chief, Axel Alonso, was like, hey, we're about to elect an African-American president, so maybe we need to retcon and or do something with some of our icons. So basically, we don't have enough black characters. So with that inspiring dictum, the Marvel Brain Trust set out to find a way to... They were banding around, like, can we actually just replace Peter Parker or make him black? But they ended up just creating
character.
Miles Morales, who I don't actually have this documented anywhere. I'm not sure he was super well regarded before
I have only the vaguest memory of him. Never read any comics with him in it, so I don't know.
I think people, maybe even people of color, felt sort of exactly like you'd feel a little pandered to. Like this isn't actually coming from an organic, felt place for anybody. But Lord and Miller got their hands on it in the 2010s. Lord and Miller, need I remind us, are two uber nerds who met at Dartmouth. They're Ivy Leaguers that were interested in animation. And the reason that they have a career is because they were on the alumni magazine at Dartmouth with Eric Eisner, the son of Michael Eisner, the then CEO of Disney. And Eric was just like, hey, Dad, you should check these guys out. There's something. They've got real talent. And they did. And they got a chance to do Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And they created a super uber nerdy, funny movie that didn't make any sense. And you can actually find a TED Talk that either Lord or Miller did on this that's kind of interesting. They created Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and it was just like everything that a critic of the Spider-Verse movies might lob at it. It was just like so navel-gazing and circular. And
I remember really liking it.
Well, I'm not actually talking about the movie as made, because that movie, they actually got fired from that movie.
Huh.
The movie because, like comedy writers loved it and stuff, but the executives were just like, we don't know what to do with this. This doesn't make any sense. They fire Lord and Miller. They kick around the property for a year trying to make it work. I don't know why everybody is so, we must do Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, but it's in production. They've already spent money on it. And so they go round and round and round. They finally bring Lord and Miller back and say, which is one of those things that doesn't usually happen, but maybe it's a testament to how talented and likable these guys really are. And Amy Pascal, one of the big executives at Sony, is just like, guys, you have to have a story with emotions that people can connect to. And Lord and/or Miller talks about this in his TED Talk. He's just like, that was the thing. He's like, thank goodness for this executive, because that was the key to our entire careers. We turned it into a father-son story. We found a generic character who'd already been designed. We'd already spent money on the designs. We couldn't redesign them, but we found a guy who looked like a dad and just wrote him now as the main character's dad and created a thing that everybody could connect to. And then we could layer all of our jokes and our meta commentary onto that. And suddenly people were connected and people cared. And it was the most important lesson in our entire lives. And of course, you can certainly see that in their subsequent work. They've gone on to do 21 Jump Street, and obviously they got fired off the Solo movie. And what are their other ones?
The Lego movie.
The Lego movie, of course, yes. All movies with a really smart 3-act structure with heart on which to build their deconstructionist fun narratives. Like they really are as smart as anybody operating. You could compare them to Pixar, maybe Pixar, Glory Days Pixar. You could compare them just in terms of, we've got guys with a really great, not innate, but learned story sense, and that are going to give us something to really connect to and feel things about, but they're also really funny and metatextual, oftentimes in the best way. Like it's not a good movie. For whatever reason, I saw 22 Jump Street, the sequel to 21 Jump Street. I don't even remember why, because I hate those kinds of movies. But the amount of, hey, it's a sequel, isn't it dumb that they made us make 22 Jump Street? The amount of that movie does, and the cleverness with which it does it, and the affection with which it does it, and the ability to then have an emotional story at the core that you care about, but also it's a movie about how dumb comedy sequels that the studio makes you make are stupid. It's like these guys are operating at a whole nother level in terms of the ability to do all that stuff without any of the individual pieces destroying the other pieces.
Let's, like we talked about before, the Lego movie. The Lego movie is a deconstruction of the hero's journey,
right?
With a ton of affection for the hero's journey, and so it's sweet and it's funny and it's charming and it's got its emotional beats, and it works as a sort of meta commentary on the hero's journey. That's also a love letter to the hero's journey,
right? And functions actually as a hero's journey. Like the movie
it is in fact a hero's journey, and has this whole father-son story subtext that's behind it all.
Right. So heretofore, they've been able
and
to...
that pulls it all together at the end.
Yes. Apparently, Kathleen Kennedy didn't think that they could pull this off with Solo, and so she fired them. Now
she's an idiot.
She's an idiot. Also, it is hard to imagine their brand meshing very well with the sort of
sincerity
of
Star Wars.
Of Star Wars. But if it was going to fit in anywhere, it would have been in the my most hated of Star Wars corners, the sort of rogue world, which I've never cared about personally. Yeah, in any case, that's Lord and Miller. Spider-Verse has been extremely influential as an animated property.
We saw that in the trailers with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles trailer.
Yeah, I don't think we got that on my screening, but I have seen that trailer, and it is that. Also, just the idea that CGI animation, I mean, it's such an obvious idea, but somebody has to do it. CGI animation doesn't have to look the same. We can do different things. What Spider-Verse actually is an incredibly labor-intensive, and the second movie was even more expensive and labor-intensive process where they make a CGI movie and then they are digitally painting over the frames. So people are going in individually. It's not just computers. It's somebody with a pen and an iPad or whatever that's drawing over computer animation that's already been made. So it's a little bit like the old style, if you've ever seen the Ralph Bashki Lord of the Rings, where they would rotoscope, where they just take photography of humans doing things or animals doing things and just draw over it to get but in this case, you're animating stuff and then you're drawing over the animation, and you don't need me to tell you that you can do some pretty impressive and cool
You get your
effects.
CGI to give you all of the motion and all of the effects, and then you go back and you give it a really hand-drawn quality frame by frame.
Yes. Now, I did personally, this isn't really a complaint, just an observation. I did find that in this particular movie, and I don't remember this being the case in Spider-Verse, that there was a little bit of uncanny valley for me personally. Just particularly Gwen and Miles come so close to just being human, but then they're animated, that there were certain things maybe with their faces that I was just like, I would actually prefer the exaggeration of a Disney caricature or something like that, as opposed to even the caricaturing of a beautiful woman like Belle or something like that. Actually would, for me, work a little bit better than these characters that come so close to being just photorealistic but aren't. But I'm sure that's just me. In any case, I think that's all the prelude. So who wants to go first? We have trans. We have, did I say complicated? Was that
You
my
said
word?
complicated, and I said incomplete
Incomplete. So
or unfinished or something like that.
who do our listeners want to hear from first? Do you want to go first with incomplete, or do you want...
No, I want to hear trans.
You want to hear... Okay, let's get the most provocative take out of the way.
Sure, yeah. Let's see, where to start? So I was really looking forward to Spider-Verse. I am a fan of the first one. I am uncomfortable with it. I think my opinion of it has solidified into, it is a deconstruction type movie. It's not really about father and son. It's about, you need to construct your own identity. Don't let anyone stand in your way. And I don't know. It's hard now that I've seen the sequel to say that was it wasn't as solid as it was after I saw this movie, for sure.
Well, let me push back immediately, though.
Yeah, please.
Yes, but these guys are too smart to just do the dumb thing that Rian Johnson would do, where he's just like middle finger to family, to the patriarch, like where he just wants to alienate half of his audience. Because what it actually seems like they might be doing is, Miles needs to construct his own identity, but the reason that he's able to do that is because he's got a strong family and he comes from.
I think that argument is still entirely intact and plausible. I think that what you can argue, and you don't have to agree with this, but I think that it's still plausible to argue that what sets Miles apart from all the other Spider-Men across the Spider-Verse is that Miles has a good mom and dad.
I think that's what they would argue.
And I think that's the story I think that's the text. And you can say that, I think we can have an argument about, okay, well, that's the text, but what's the subtext? But the text is Miles has a good dad and a good mom, and it's what every other Spider-Man has never had. And it's what sets Miles apart and makes him the best of them all and gives him a chance to sort of surpass them and write his own story. It's
Which, by the way,
of his and foundation of his strong family.
This is just the ritual decoupled from meanings argument again, because if people don't remember or haven't listened to those episodes, what I basically said was, when Miles powers up at the end, like he's at his lowest point, it's the part of the hero's journey where he has no power. The end of the Empire Strikes Back, and we haven't gotten to Return of the Jedi yet. It's that part of the story. And so he needs to find his inner strength, as a hero always does. And I just argued, there's nothing built into the movie that tells you why he does it. It's just the time in the movie where the character would do that. And so I've coined my famous phrase, ritual decoupled from meaning, which is just a way of expressing what's true of so many Hollywood movies these days, where we're going through the ritual, we're doing the act of a superhero movie or a hero's journey, but we don't have the actual morality behind it, the actual emotional legwork behind it, the actual things, the actual stuff that empowers these types, the typology behind it. It isn't actually there. It's just the remnants. There's something kind of postmodern about it. It's like we're still playing with all these tropes. Like, of course, the hero is going to power up, but did the movie actually do that work, or did just our expectation of a movie doing that work do that work for us?
Mm-hmm.
To which Jake responded,
actually, the story is that all of Miles's mentors, Peter B. Parker and his friends and his found family, didn't have the power to help push him across that line.
Right.
And so they tied him up and left him in a room. And then the actual thing that was transformative for Miles was this moment where his dad comes and knocks on the door. He's sitting there tied up. He's given up on life and on himself and on his ability to have powers. And his dad just gives a speech, and he's like, I don't know if you're there. I don't know if you're listening, but I see this spark in you. It's why I push you. I love you, Miles. I'm sorry if I've screwed this all up. And that's the moment where Miles finds his resolve and begins to level up, breaks his bonds, and then goes and figures things out. So the Obi-Wan character, the mentor character, the Peter B. Parker, the found family, all that stuff, none of that worked for Miles. But his dad saying, I believe in you. I'm sorry. I feel we're growing apart. Your uncle just died. Something happened. I don't want that to be us. I push you. I feel like maybe I've pushed you away, but it's because I love you and I believe in you. That's the moment. Miles's connection is in his strength and his power is actually his relationship with his father.
Right. And so everybody that heard you make that argument found it very plausible, and I did too.
Likewise.
I still feel doubt in my heart. And I think they'd make that argument too. I think they'd say that's obviously what we're doing. That's the text. But there is something in me that says there's a disconnect here. And what I said at the time in those episodes, I think if you go back, is I said, eventually these guys are going to betray us and it's going to be obvious that there was never anything there. Like, they're going this deconstructionist route. They're on the cutting edge of it. And one day we'll get the movie that...
I think, if I could try to put it this way, see if this is helpful. It's a question of whether or not Miles' identity is, and his ability to have a solid identity as Spider-Man, is a function of like the love of his family and love of his dad in particular, or whether all of that stuff, how do I put this? It's a question of hierarchy. Like, is Miles's identity sort of subordinate to his... Man, I guess I don't have the language for this. Help me out here. I'm trying to... It's a chicken or egg question in terms of what the filmmakers actually do. Is his identity come from his family, or is his family just sort of just one of the ingredients with which he constructs his identity?
So this is why you have to lay out your trans argument.
Yeah.
And why I have to tell you why you're wrong.
Okay, so that brings us back to...
Or why you may be right, but we don't know yet.
All right.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
Well, I think... So having laid all that out, of course, very important to see what they do in the third movie, because it's going to push it. You didn't perfectly articulate what you wanted to say, but I think we all have a sense of what you wanted to say. And the third movie, I think, will help answer that question. Like, how much is this just a meta sort of whatever?
Well, so what I felt watching this movie is just toying. It's just an abstraction of storytelling. It's about how you create your own identity, and the way that you do that is by breaking the bonds of those who are over you and try to tell you who you are. And you say, no, I create my own story. And you say it especially to all the stupid dads that you have, because in this movie, dad sucks. And yeah, you can tell me that in the text of Miles' story, it's just dad flailing again. But I say, no, Miles' dad is bad. Suddenly he has no idea what to say, and he's both weak and a tyrant at different points. He's either like, I have no idea what to say to you, how to lead you, or I'm just going to yell at you. So it's either sort of pathetic or tyrant. In both cases, it's weak. You have Oscar Isaac's Spider-Man 2099, who's more just pure tyrant. He's a father figure. He's a bad dad. All he knows how to do, just like Miles' dad, is yell at him and assume that should have done the job. And then you have Gwen Stacy's dad, Spider-Gwen's dad, who alternates between weak and a tyrant. He doesn't know what to say to his daughter. And then he's like, without listening to you, I'm just going to arrest you because somehow my duty as a cop overrides all the actual ways that I should be talking to you and figuring out what happened as my daughter. And the movie has this, it's actually a pretty clumsy plot point, I think. This is all spoilers, folks. We didn't say that, I guess, did we? But
all
spoilers.
Of our episodes are spoilers.
I know, yeah, they should know. You should know by now, listener. And then at the end of the narrative of Gwen and her dad that we get in this movie, Gwen's dad is going to say, hey, as he's sort of trying to make things right with her, heal the relationship, hey, I'm not going to be a captain anymore. And she's like, you're not going to be a captain. Why? The most important thing or the best thing I ever did in my life was you. So that makes no sense because, again, the logic in the script is, I'm not going to be a captain. Why? Because you're the most important thing. Now that actually doesn't make sense. And I know it's supposed to make a kind of emotional sense. The idea would be, I've prioritized my career ahead of you. But what I think the movie is actually saying, what I think the actual subtext would be, is that I have an idea of law and order that hasn't let you be who you need to be. And that's corrupted our relationship. And so I'm going to let go of law and order so that our relationship can be whole. And I'm going to center my life around you, Gwen, and submit who I am as a man to who I think you ought to be or want to be as my daughter. Just like Miles' dad eventually is going to learn the lesson of, hey, just like Miles tells him in the guise of Spider-Man, you just need to let your son spread his wings. The idea being submit to Miles. And dad needs to submit to, and everyone needs to realize that they've got to stop trying to control Miles and his story, because it's wrong to try to control someone else's story. It's wrong to try to impose rules and laws, and people who do that are lame and they stink. And it's a good thing that Miles is too strong for that, and that he's going to be able to break free, break all the bonds, break all the rules, break all the laws, show that it's stupid, that the people who make the laws and the rules don't understand, actually, that it's their responsibility to create their own destiny, like Oscar Isaac clearly, somehow in the plotting, I don't know how yet, but I think it will turn out that, and third movie could prove me wrong, but it seems to me it's going to turn out that he actually doesn't understand, Spider-Man 2099, doesn't understand the meta rules, the big rules of the universe that he's trying to enforce, that he's actually wrong, and that's part of what makes him a tyrant.
He's also going to repent of being a tyrant.
He'll repent of being a tyrant, yeah. But I think plot-wise, it's likely that it'll be shown he's wrong somehow about the rules. And I do admit, yeah, I could be wrong about that. I think that's a pretty tenuous point. But and so you've got all these dad figures who are no good and who need to learn to submit to their children. And then you've got mom. It's a good thing that mama is, so wise and stable. That she's so understanding. The dads are just reacting. They're like, whoa, what do we do? Like our kids, we don't know they're going crazy, or we don't know how to talk to them. We're just going to yell at them. We're going to arrest them. You stink, kid. Why didn't you listen to me? I yelled at him. We talked. They're all like that. But mom is like, I have a plan. Like, I'm not just reacting. Like, I'm proactive. Like, I've got something to say. I'm going to tell my son, you're the most important thing in the world. Don't you dare let anyone else tell you that you can't be part of the awesome club. You make sure that everyone respects you. You make sure that, like, you're the top dog. So mama's got this like ego reinforcement speech from Miles, which is, I hated it in the trailer and I hated it in the movie. And as the movie went, I have not felt so viscerally angry at a movie for as long as maybe since the first Transformers with Michael Bay, where I felt like these guys are just attacking, what would I say? They're just attacking like basic moral order. And I feel like they're attacking storytelling too. I feel like they're attacking me and they hate me. I feel like they're attacking dads and they're attacking families with their movie, because it's just so everything's in play. And your job as the hero is to make sure that you're at the center, that you're on top, that you don't have to listen to anyone who tells you what you don't like. You don't have to play by any rules except the rules that you set for yourself. And then along with that, we get all these little clues in the movie. The one that I noticed right off the bat, and there were some that I didn't notice that I read about later, but the one that I noticed, which is right at the beginning of the movie, is a sticker or a sign, a banner in Spider-Gwen's room, which is protect trans kids. And I felt like, yeah, this is a good clue. Like, the movie is cluing us into what it wants to do, what it wants the subtext to be. And I see plenty of confirming evidences that this is right. That, like, this is a movie about how you set the terms of your own identity. And if you want to be trans, or if you want to be anything, no one had better stand in your way or tell you otherwise. So I had this reaction as the movie went on, not the whole movie, but there were points at which I was just very angry. And I felt like this movie hates me and I hate it back. And I don't like it. I don't respect it. And as it's going, I find, well, there's other stuff I want to say about, I guess, just that I think it's boring in places. I think dramatically it doesn't work well in places. I think it's kind of dull and it drags. But mainly it's this thematic stuff or this archetypal stuff or this subtextual stuff that, to me, felt like the text of the movie. It felt like, hey, we want you to think this way. We want you to believe in this morality. We want you to be pro-trans. Like, and dads do suck, and they do need to get in line.
So can I respond to that? So here's my question for you. How do you tell a coming-of-age story where a 15-year-old son or daughter is trying to differentiate from their family, and the dads and moms are trying to negotiate that differentiation?
I think you tell it without metatextually cluing me in to the idea that I should overturn rules and order as a rite of passage.
So explain that for me.
Well, I see where you're going, Jake. And there's a difference between being universally hostile and making a point that plays to our current cultural moment of overthrowing all rules and boundaries than there is to like a localized, dad doesn't understand me. In order to come of age, I have to do, either I'm going to do disrespectful things and then come back from that, or I'm going to do what seem to dad to be disrespectful things but aren't, in order to win my place and have dad's respect.
Any good coming of age movie is going to be about testing the boundaries and
yes,
about
that's what I'm
having
trying
to
to
let
say.
go and all that sort of thing.
But this movie is different. This movie is philosophical about it. It's like the whole idea of rules and boundaries is wrong. I think it's a difference.
Is that actually true though?
Yeah, I believe it's true because I believe that in this movie, dads need to submit to their kids, and that's different. That's different because of what Gwen's dad does plot-wise.
Okay, well, I think then we should have that discussion rather than assert it because I don't see that. I'm not convinced that you're right about that.
Okay.
I don't see the text being dads have to submit to their children. I see.
Would you say you don't see, or would you say the jury's out until number 3?
We could say that the jury's out, but I just don't see Ben asserted that as just like clear as day and obvious already in this movie. And I don't.
Well, let's have the discussion.
Yeah, you have to make a.
So I did start making a case. I said Gwen's dad's arc follows this pattern, this path.
Okay, so
that's one plot point.
Okay, so that's your assertion.
That's my assertion.
Yeah. So here's the thing, or here's the question. Is it not true that when dads are suddenly confronted with the idea that their kid may not be who they thought they were, that they often get confused and reactionary? Is that not a pretty universal experience?
Sure.
Isn't that what happens to him?
Sure.
And so he doesn't know how to reconcile his life, the way he's tried to live his life by his code, and the way that his daughter, who has tried to embrace that code in her own way, he doesn't know how to reconcile those two, right? So he has a freak out moment. Is it not common? Is that not a common thing?
Sure.
Okay. So does that have to be that therefore the movie is saying dads are stupid? And he is stupid because he has to throw off Law and Order to be reconciled and submit himself to Gwen? Or is it possible that we're in a Spider-Man movie and that's who?
The movie is like this play of symbols. It's like we're going to talk about stories and deconstruct them. The movie is not like this is just a drama about a girl. I mean, I recognize that the genius of Lord and Miller is to have both and that's what they want.
That's what they're good at.
That's what they're good at. I recognize that. So I'm going to rein myself back in some. But I think that what's going on in the movie is that is it the bigger philosophical play, like the bigger deconstruction of everything is what guides and helps us interpret the little stories, because it seems clear to me watching the movie, which spends so much time on the bigger idea of stories and the universe of stories and the rules for don't break the canon moments of Spider-Man or the universe will break. I think that lets us interpret what's going on in the smaller stories. And that lets us interpret like the subtext and the symbolism.
Well, let me jump in. I feel some of the same discomfort that you feel about a lot of this stuff. And I do not like where the Gwen story goes. I would say if we just had a mini movie of the Gwen story, I would actually feel pretty bad about that. I think that's your strongest argument. I think the Gwen story is indefensible. I think metatextually what they're doing could be more interesting. I think metatextually, big picture, the Gwen story, what to talk about first? Okay, let's talk about the Gwen story. Trans kids are owning this story. It's all over the internet today. She's got that trans sticker. It's trans colors. I don't care too much about that, but she's at the very least lesbian coded, right? Just the way she looks. She's other.
Which they also, again, being Lord and Miller, made plausible.
Yes. They
gave themselves plausible deniability on in the very first movie.
Yeah.
She didn't have a lesbian haircut when she arrived on the scene. That happened because of an incident with Miles, and then she kept it.
Right.
And so there's a plausibly deniable way of saying, this is her affection for Miles that she, and her love of Miles, that she's keeping that hairstyle, which of course is just like hyper sophisticated garbage.
Right. Yeah.
She is lesbian coded.
She is lesbian coded, if not trans coded. And the reason I say trans coded is because she just looks like a dude. They make her not conventionally attractive in the way that, in the face with the buck teeth and stuff. It's actually a very...
They played that up a little bit more in this
movie, yeah.
And so it's sort of you can say that she's been retcon transcoded a little bit.
Yes, I think so. And then you have the sticker, which
I didn't notice.
So it's right there.
Did you guys notice it without seeing stills and people talking about this?
Yeah, I noticed it. I noticed it in the movie. There was other stuff like
were you tipped off to it beforehand? Or
no.
Okay.
No, I wasn't.
It's like right on her wall.
I felt on guard for it for some reason. I hadn't read anything about it or seen a still. Apparently, the dad also wears a trans sticker by his badge or something. I didn't catch that. I didn't catch the BLM sticker on Miles' backpack. I heard about that.
Well, I think what really pushes that. There's an individual line that encapsulates everything. I'm going to actually make some space for the Jake side of things here, if that's the way we want to cast it, in a minute. But let me just get some of the stuff out of the way that I do feel strongly about. Lord and Miller are such masters of speaking out of both sides of their mouths in a way that is pretty hateful. And the dad section, Gwen's dad, actually has the worst, one of the most, I think, evil versions, something that offended me, which is where she says, "Dad, I know you have to wear the badge because
I wrote down this line.
If you don't, someone who shouldn't will." What a laboratory engineered, beautiful Mona Lisa level artistry went into making a line that would play to all sides.
Well, then she said, actually, the line I wrote down wasn't that. I wrote down, "This mask is my badge." So I was like,
but Jake, you come from a police family. My brother was a police officer. Evil, just evil. Just to write a line that we could plausibly maybe be okay with, but the thing that it's actually meant to signal to people is no one should want to be a police officer. No one should want to be a hierarchical warrior for our society. That's a dumb thing that dumb, cruel people, evil, sadistic people do. But maybe a good man puts himself in there
to keep the bad guys out,
to keep the sadists that would naturally want to be police officers. I mean, my blood boils. And I like things about the movies, but so I'm just getting this out of the way up front since we landed on the Gwen storyline. But that line alone, combined with all the sort of lesbian and or trans and or whatever coding, it's just such a perfect allegory for, hey, Dad, I'm different.
Yeah, I think
can I uphold my values or accept that you're different? Can I do both? No, I just have to be done with... I mean, I'm not the one that's making this interpretation. The otherly sexual people are making this interpretation. They love this storyline.
Yeah, and here's what I think about that, though, or the difficulty of it, and maybe the genius of it. I don't think you can make a coming-of-age story without it being a trans allegory or an LGBTQ allegory. And I don't think you can make an LGBTQ allegory without it being a coming-of-age style story in this type of context. And so it's one-to-one. And I don't think you can do it in a good storytelling way without it also being the kind of thing that somebody can turn into an allegory for their conversion to Christianity as part of their coming of age or differentiate. Because what we're actually just talking about is differentiation. And the genius of Lord and Miller is they're so good at walking the line of being plausibly inclusive of absolutely anyone and everything, that then it's a question of, okay, to what degree are they telling a good story that anybody can put themselves into while virtue signaling their way through? And
that's where I feel like...
To what degree is it just subversive?
I mean, we know which side of that coin they fall on.
Right.
We know what they're actually signaling. And so does the entire trans community, like I said.
Right, with badges and colors and other little signals and things like that.
Also, I get what you're saying. And, this is why superhero stories have always been an allegory for deviant sexuality. So there is that reality. On the other hand, I'm not sure I want to go all the way with you in saying there's no way to tell this kind of a story without it. A proper coming of age story involves the child and the parent moving towards each other. And the parent saying, okay, I need to let go and let this child move on. And the child saying, oh, now I understand why the hierarchy was there. Now I understand why my dad felt this way. Now I understand. And so to have the dad, I do think it is enormously important and enormously damning that the storyline is, I can't be a police officer anymore. I mean, that's a bad allegory. That's a bad coming of age story. That is the worst of everything Ben felt attacked by, just like, and it is a pretty perfect allegory for, I'm a man in my church and my kid comes out as whatever.
So I have to resign as an elder.
So I have to resign as an elder. And it's a better allegory for that than it is for whatever good thing we could say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so I don't like that story. It's beautifully told. It's moving. It's one of the most visually arresting and best parts of the movie. Just in like the Gwen opening and then the Gwen going back to her dad stuff is good.
All the stuff with the dad to me though felt emotionally off. Part of it was seeing the trans sticker right away, but part of it was I could feel them being aesthetic instead of truthful.
Yeah, and that's where I didn't have that reaction. I loved how it was kind of like we were in a mood ring or something. Like the colors were changing. It was
really
felt.
cool.
I thought it was cool.
I thought it was cool.
And the vulture fight was awesome, and it just totally badass to not have the credits hit until 20 minutes in. I loved that. That was a surge of adrenaline.
Just really great decision making.
So I want to get to talking about some of the things I liked about the movie, but I do actively feel pretty attacked by the Gwen storyline and the way that it wraps up, and that everything that I just said. I do not like that. And insofar as it's indicative of their larger project, I do share Ben's concerns that ultimately they just want to tear everything down. Now, where I'll make space for the Jake side of things, and at some point I'll actually give my own opinion instead of just reacting. But the movie is fun and gorgeous, and there's a lot of cool stuff. It's enjoyable to watch, and that's worth saying. Now, I did actually bog down at a certain point, and I'll talk about that at a certain point. But I did not have the visceral reaction that you did, where I just felt pummeled by what this movie was doing. It did not strike me like Rian Johnson's Last Jedi or something like that, where I just felt constantly like I couldn't even give my heart to the movie.
What I want to say is I'll go with you there on the Gwen story. I won't go there with you on Jefferson Davis being a bad dad. I won't go there.
Well, hold on. He might become a better dad in the next movie, but there's like a dad meta narrative is what I'm saying in this movie. There's three dads who are.
Yeah. Here's the thing. So Miguel's just a tyrant, right? And what Jefferson Davis is doing is, I think, being a pretty true to life dad who is trying to figure things out and trying to figure out how to let his son become an adult, which is what any 15-year-old boy wants. He wants to become an adult. He wants to be treated as an adult. He needs space to do that sort of thing. And your options when your teenage son starts to spread his wings and try to figure out who he is and try to differentiate himself are to try to control him, to try to feel like you can't control him and walk away and just react, which is Gwen's dad. So, or to try to find the road that you walk together of leading him into maturity. And that's going to be hard. And it actually involves a lot of flailing. And if you've watched even the best dads work through this with their kids, there's a lot of flailing that goes on. There's a lot of reactions. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of overreactions. And the way that mom and dad play that and play those scenes is just, you can say, okay, well, that's a caricature. But I've seen that dynamic multiple times in good, strong Christian homes. And so I just don't have a problem with, now, again, we'll see where they take it and where it goes. But if we're talking about differentiation and coming of age,
if you stripped away all the meta narrative, if you stripped away everything, if you didn't have Gwen's dad, if all you had was the story of Miles and Jefferson, I think Ben would probably agree none of us would feel bad, right? That's just a good standard.
But boring standard. Sorry, but that's a different criticism. as far as the Miles part goes.
I
'Cause
did.
I thought it was.
I did for whatever reason check out a little. Maybe some of it had to do with the IMAX, like I said earlier. But I did for whatever reason check out a little bit during the rooftop, like during the interlude in the middle of the movie. I did find that I do kind of agree with you there, but that's really neither here
Sure.
nor
Okay.
there for our discussion.
That's fine. That's fine. Sure. I think you're right. I think without that framing stuff of Gwen's dad, I'd go with you. But
I think,
but with the rest of it,
And Miguel, it's like we've put up with this character and a ton of Marvel stuff. Now it's the bad patriarch.
He's just the bad guy.
Yeah, but he's probably gonna, whether he
He'll have a
repents
change
or
of
not.
heart or
but-
something.
but-
I don't know that he will. I think that what we might end up finding is he's more nefarious than we ever knew.
So that's interesting.
He's already signaled that. Like he was about to fang the vulture and then got caught at it. And then he's like injecting himself with stuff. We've got these other little things going on.
Comic book lore, he temporarily paralyzes guys that he bites. He doesn't kill them.
Okay. Well, I don't know anything about the comic book lore, but the way that it plays those things is there's a sinister undercurrent to this guy, and there's more to it, even more to his story as he's revealed it than what we actually know. So I don't know that we actually understand anything about him or his real motivations, but I think it's all yet to be seen, and that's why it's hard to make judgments about.
But if I judge this like a piece of music, right, you have all the motifs we're talking about with Miles' dad and like the coming of age story. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I agree. Those motifs, they're fine. But you put those motifs in the symphony or whatever that this movie is creating, which is Gwen's dad is the framing story for everything. And then you've got a parallel motif with Bad Dad Miguel. And you're playing, the symphony is playing with these big ideas of tearing down structures and telling your own story, and telling your own story seems to be the main plot. Then I'm like, the music of this movie tells me a clear story.
Isn't there in any differentiation coming of age story and with your 15-year-old son a sense in which he actually does need to figure out what his own story is going to be and the path that he's going to take?
Yeah, but
and as a dad, you have to figure out how to let go and let him make his own decisions and forge his own path forward.
But it is,
but that's not the music of this movie. The music of this movie is create your own destiny in an ultimate moral sense, where the universe ought to bend around your identity. You're creating your identity, and having that be of paramount importance is the most important thing. That's even what Miles is going to tell his alternate universe mom, like I did it, like I beat them all, like I became top dog, like I didn't let anyone say no to me. Like I feel like that's the moral of this movie. The mom's speech is the moral of this movie, and that's text. And that's a terrible moral.
That's not a full or accurate representation of what he says to his mom. Because what he says to his mom too is, it was always you guys.
Well, that's what I do agree with Ben. I think ultimately, whether they get there in the third Spider-Verse movie or they get there in a different movie, these guys are postmodern deconstructionists. I think there's a lot of things. There's the whole anarcho-terrorist coded, not even coded, but just there's the anarcho-terrorist punk Spider-Man.
Spider-Punk.
There's BLM stickers. There's it's like they couldn't do more to signal that they're in the process of dismantling power and doing things that we hate. And that they hate us. It's true. It's there. Ben's not wrong to feel uncomfortable about it or even punished by it. Where I'm sympathetic to Jake's argument is they're smart. They'll do something more interesting. There'll be Miles is not actually probably going to just get to make his own world with no consequences. Gwen will die or who knows what will happen, but there will be a sacrifice made in order for him to self-actualize. They're good enough storytellers. They're not going to do a Rian Johnson where it's like, I don't even want to give you a satisfying story because I'd rather deconstruct. They're going to figure out how to be smarter than that. So I suspect the third movie isn't just going to end with you get to make your own destiny and throw off all the rules. There'll be a lot of stuff in there that will encourage that will help make kids grow in the wrong direction. There'll be stuff that we can feel really bad about, just like there is in this one, but they're not going to be pure Rian Johnsonian nihilists about it. They're too smart. And as far as is this movie in and of itself bad, I think the Gwen storyline is. I would say the Gwen storyline just evil. The other stuff I think is problematic. I was uncomfortable with it. But I did see this with a bunch of teenage boys. I did not feel the need to dissect it for them or take away their enjoyment of it. We saw it as a youth group function, folks, if anyone's wondering why I saw this with a bunch of teenage boys. That's why. I did not feel like it was a threat particularly to them. Maybe because what it's doing is so sophisticated that they would have to be somewhat sophisticated to pick up on some of the bad stuff. Like you have to be media savvy to actually derive the poison. And this particular bunch wasn't. I think I could imagine myself seeing it with a kid who I'd very much want to have a long discussion with and say, okay, let's break this down and see what all they're doing, good and bad. So I didn't feel quite as like viscerally bad about it in watching it. I feel the same unease that I felt with the first one. Like, I think these guys are master deconstructionists. I think they're wildly smart in the way that they're able to take traditional narratives and sort of subversively put their deconstruction in there. And I think it was basically a good and fun thing when they did it with the Lego movie. But the more they go after morality itself, and I think eventually they will make the movie that we will all just agree, no matter how fun this is, it's pure poison. That's still my prophecy. It's been my prophecy since Spider-Man 1, and I have never been able to adequately explain to anyone why Spider-Man 1 is the tip-off for me, or why I'm mad at it when I'm not mad at Kevin Feige. But Kevin Feige's not nearly as talented as these guys are. He's not as good. Who cares what Kevin Feige does?
It's because they do everything that we criticize every other movie with the same motivations and the same kind of woke people behind it. They do everything well.
Yeah.
We'll go see a Marvel movie or go see any number of movies out there with the same immoral, horrible people behind it and the same types of designs and messages, and they suck at it. And they're bad storytellers. They're bad visual storytellers. They don't understand how to tell a movie visually. They don't understand how to use a sound. They don't know how to develop characters. They don't know how to tell a story that has heart. They don't know how to put it all together.
If they may see you, they're not even on the cutting edge of special effects. They're just bad in every way.
Yeah.
They're just bad. And so then we go and we see those movies and we say, well, they're fun. It's fun. And it's got some virtue signaling and poison in it.
So like a toothless snake or something.
But it's...
Well, the virtue signaling is
But they suck. And why can't they make a good movie with dialogue and characterization and things like that? And we go see this movie and it actually ticks every single possible box. Mm-hmm. These guys every time tick every single possible box. It is visually stunning. The characterization is there. It's got heart. It's got action. It's got everything that you could want top to bottom. And they're just as bad and deviant as anybody else, but there's a level at which they demand to be taken seriously.
Right. And on that level, I can't be comfortable with this movie, but I think I could still say it's a signpost of what's to come. That Gwen storyline does bug me quite a bit. And I am so tired of meta narratives and deconstruction. It's so boring. I was talking to somebody.
I felt like they were too. And here they are. Yeah,
they were like, oh, well, we have to do this.
And so they tipped their hat here and dialed it back there, and it was still too much.
It was, yeah.
But you felt them pull back from it. Yeah, this was fun the first time, and we know we have to acknowledge that these are the train tracks that we laid, while also trying to.
No, now we're downstream of Loki. We're downstream of Everything Everywhere All at Once. We're downstream of all these things that have already done this. Doctor Strange did it horribly. But I mean, it is just, I was comparing this to somebody man, this is the first time where it's really grated on me in terms of, and this isn't their fault necessarily. They were just stuck with having to do this. But it is just man, what if somebody made a Lord of the Rings movie and it was about how hobbits always go on journeys? And we're going to break the paradigm of a hobbit going on a journey, or we're going to accept the paradigm of a hobbit going on a journey. But the one thing we're not going to do is just go on the dang journey. And I was like, I like hobbit movies where hobbits go on journeys. I don't need somebody to keep asking the question, what is it that makes a journey for hobbits? I'm really tired of this. And I don't feel like Spider-Man deserves it. I feel like it's they're in their minds, and this isn't so much a criticism of the movie or Lord of Miller as just where we're at as a culture. In their minds, it's one of the reasons we can do these meta narratives is because we're playing with a quasi-biblical text here. We've got the most important myth of our time, and we're interrogating it. And I'm like, it's not the most important myth of our time. It's not that great. It's Spider-Man. He swings around on a web. I don't mean to be dismissive. There's a reason these things have cultural staying power. But, the great question of, does every Spider-Man have to sacrifice? It ain't that great of a question.
Yeah. I'd be lying if if I didn't say some of my frustration was the feeling of like plot slowdown, like that kind of plotting was like, I don't find this question compelling. It makes the whole thing feel more abstract and more pointed in its deconstruction to me as I'm watching.
Yeah, I felt some of that.
If that makes sense.
I enjoyed it on a scene-to-scene basis. I really liked India, even though that had some of the more annoying overt virtual signaling. I liked Spider-World, 2099, whatever. I liked most of the second half action. What are the other things I liked? Just to be a liker instead of a hater. I liked the look and feel of the Gwen stuff enormously. I liked the Vulture. He was a cool bad guy. I liked Spot. He was a cool bad guy. He was had a fun Spider-Man-y kind of bad guy. Just a normal guy who got hit with the wrong thing and became bitter. That's my favorite classic style of Spider-Man villain. And I like
the villain of the week who, I mean, that is what he felt like.
Yeah.
That's why they called him that.
That was
fun.
I thought they did a nice job with him, and I look forward to seeing where he goes. And I assume it'll be somewhere
he
interesting.
Was fun.
Yeah. So, in terms of entertainment value, I was a little bit like, I don't need another sort of interrogation of the Spider-Man myth / any interrogation of the Spider-Man myth. And also, yeah, I did. Some of it was just IMAX animation, but the parent stuff on the rooftop and the mom speech, I was kind of checked out on. I was just like, I'm not sure these emotional scenes would actually distinguish themselves in a drama. They distinguish themselves here because they're not something that you expect in this type of movie to be done at this level. But I don't know, her little thing about take care of the boy that like we're both co-parents now of the child that you were. I don't get that. I don't get what's emotional about that. I'm not trying to be a jerk here. I'm just saying, like, I didn't. Maybe Jake, as a father of teenagers, that was profound. I don't know. You're a father of teenagers. I'm not.
I don't think there's anything profound about it, but I think that there's something innate to a mom who into motherhood where you always see your kid as your baby boy or your baby girl, and don't ever want to lose or let go of that. That's part of what dad has to help mom do. And so that's part of mom's angle.
Right.
Part of dad's angle is always sort of this sense of both. He has to give up a certain amount. Like you guys have toddlers and babies, and there is the identity of your toddler and baby, but even your toddler is like trying to figure out, like, what are the boundaries between me and mom and dad? Mm-hmm. And that's where the toddler is like pushing and trying to say no and trying to, that stage of that people call the terrible twos into the threes that's what it is. It's trying to figure out the separation between me and mom. What's me or what's mom and what's not mom? What's dad and what's not dad in me? And your infant children are just one-to-one synonymous with you guys. There is no individuation. And that's just the process that every kid goes through stage by stage as they grow up. And mothers typically want to keep their kids little and keep them their little babies and keep them close to the breast. And dads struggle, and they feel as a son or as a child grows more in their own agency, dad feels a loss of control, and with that loss of control, impotence. And with that sense of impotence, that I can't actually control your friends, and I can't actually control your thoughts, and I can't actually keep you from making the wrong decisions. I have to have done a good job of raising you, and I have to trust you, and I have to give you space to become yourself. And with that, there's anger, there's lashing out, there's pulling back from that, and there's a line that you walk as a dad as you try to create space for your kids to become that. And you have to do that work with your wife as well. And so all of those types of realities are what they're playing with. And so in those scenes, the degree to which that tension is alive in your heart is probably the degree to which you're going to connect or resonate with those types of scenes. So those scenes actually worked really well for me because I have a 15-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter. And I've walked through those types of things and the difficulties of those types of things with good fathers who have excommunicated their children and seen them go under church discipline and see them do things that and I've just watched them flail and wrestle and grapple with those types of issues as they have tried to figure out for themselves. And each of us walked through that ourselves one way or another and watched our parents. I had to watch my dad deal with the fact that I grew up in a baseball family. In my senior year of high school, I quit baseball, and we have family photos of us all in Purdue gear, and I went to IU. And I had to watch him figure out how to wrestle with I raised my son to be a Purdue fan, and he wants to go to IU and play baseball, and he quits. And is this a judgment of me? And did I fail? And what did I do wrong? And does he hate me? And I feel like I'm losing him. And how do we get through this to the other side of it, where he's a mature adult and we have a mature adult relationship? And that's just what the teen years are. It's pain for everybody and flailing for everybody into early 20s. And hopefully you come out on the other side of that with some kind of strength. And so all that for me as a dad is poignant. So I felt all of those scenes.
Yeah, I don't think I'm insensible to those things. I think.
Well, you're a youth group leader. I hope you wouldn't be.
Yeah, I think I don't necessarily accept. Not that you were saying this, but if any of our listeners was thinking, well, okay, the moral of the story is Nathan doesn't like this stuff because he's just not there in his life. I'm not sure I accept that. I think it didn't work for me because it didn't work for me, not because I'm insensible to.
Are you saying, Jake, that you did like the mom's speech, or you thought basically it worked?
I thought it worked I thought it worked. I'm not saying that
I will say I would have preferred that scene be given to the dad, because that's the relationship that I actually care about. Some version of that scene. It felt kind of weird that it wasn't, given how much we're
invested in the father-son stuff
and how
already.
Little we actually invested in it. It felt like they were kind of retconning. Oh, mom's important too. We forgot about her last time.
That's what it felt like to me. But it didn't feel false. It did feel like it felt pretty. So if you just want, okay, so there's what's this story they're trying to tell? There's that question. But if we're just talking on the level of true to life.
Yes. It's a good scene, and Lord took it from his life, I think.
I don't like it. I don't like it as a mom's speech. In the movie, it represented to me the ascendancy of mom over dad. That's just how I heard the music of the movie. This is, okay, all the dads suck, but mom doesn't. And mom's going to give this speech that sounds to me like pandering, like mom pandering. Like,
well, it could be that the third movie,
don't like it.
when all's said and done, we hate that speech more than anything because it represents the whole scheme of deconstruction and embrace the sort of,
right.
Be an infant forever, basically. Like, what you need to do is suckle at the teat of mom and never actually define yourself against or for the hierarchy of dad. I share your fear that actually what that represented. Again, I didn't feel it as viscerally in the moment as you did. The thing that I felt most viscerally and that in terms of something of dislike was the way the Gwen story ended up as, and just, I don't know, maybe I'm getting old and grumpy maybe, and I hate repeating it because it feels like it would be better maybe to just not let this kind of thing bother me anymore, because it's ubiquitous and who cares, and I should just be empowered enough in my own masculinity to not be bothered by this. But I am sick of women warriors and watching women's bodies do stuff that they don't do and having to regard them.
But if they were bit by a radioactive spider,
that's
if they had the force.
Yeah. I just as semiotics, as typology, I'm tired of watching a woman's legs do those things and having to regard them as desexed, even though they're obviously sexually enticing woman legs.
Yeah. And watching, in this case, a pregnant lady do all of that semiotically.
Didn't care for the pregnant lady. I didn't actually feel all that bad about, I've heard some Christians complain and conservatives complain about Peter and his baby. I just thought that was cute.
Well, it was definitely put in to be the counterpoint to the pregnant lady. Like, so let's not be too critical of mom taking baby into battle because we've got a dad taking baby into battle.
Right. And that has its own, ultimately, I don't care for that either. I don't think you should bring your baby into battle. And especially if you've got a perfectly good Mary Jane at home to take care of the baby, then why not let her? But I didn't viscerally. I was really annoyed when the pregnant lady came out on the motorcycle. I was less annoyed when Peter came out with his adorable little spider baby or whatever.
I hated them both. I didn't like Peter. I thought Peter sucked the air out of the room.
Well, Peter is a good point in Ben's favor for...
I forgot about him.
How many bad dads and lame, ineffectual dads do we have to have in one movie before we start to think there's a design?
Yeah, but he's never been a good or sufficient.
Yeah, but we thought maybe he got somewhere last time. Like if I'm writing this movie, Peter's in Miles's corner from the moment he sees how far Miguel's willing to go. Let's get rid of the pink bathrobe, and I'm fighting for you, Miles. And I know that's where this movie goes anyway, but if I'm writing this movie, it goes there a lot quicker because Peter is Miles's friend. He's a good father figure insofar as he goes, and if nothing else, he's loyal and a chill dude.
But even his speech when he pulls Miles away from the fight is going to be like, the reason I had this baby, Miles, is because you're awesome. And I think you're the best. And actually, I'll be on your side. Which just, again, feels like pandering to whoever is watching Miles as their own avatar. It's like, yeah, I'm the best. That's the idea. You're supposed to be the best. It's just about you. That all feels of a piece, at least.
Yeah, I mean, the question in my mind is, what price does Miles have to pay for me to be okay with his self-actualization? I know the one thing he's not going to do in the third movie is say, you were right, Dad, and you were right, Miguel, and it was wrong for me to... I was actually just being like Kingpin, which he is, by the way, which is something that the movie has to address in the third movie, or it's just being disingenuous. Miles makes the exact same choice that Kingpin makes in the first movie, and Kingpin's a bad guy to make that choice, but Miles is a good guy to make that choice.
Wait, it's not the exact same choice.
I am willing to see the universe destroyed in order to save the one that I love. That was Kingpin's choice. And Miles is like, well, maybe it won't destroy the universe. I'm going to find out. I'm going to tell my own story. But I think there's nothing morally different about what Miles decides than what Kingpin decides, I don't think.
Only that he simply has an intuition or a suspicion that Miguel's premise is wrong.
Right. Which is fair enough. But I still think the movie's being disingenuous.
And that means that he has to passively stand by and watch people die.
Yes, I would agree with that. But
as opposed to Kingpin, who's willing to tear apart the fabric of the universe to
restore already dead people
that he can't make his peace with, which is to say, steal them from other stories, other universes.
Right. I still think that's something the movie needs to interrogate if it's going to be play honest.
Sure.
It has to have an answer for that question because what they're doing is at least similar, even if Miles is maybe.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to come to a moment where Miles's intuition is either proven right, that it's actually not going to tear apart the fabric of the universe for him to just be Spider-Man and try to and pull off saving both and taking care of his family, or there it is right in front of you, and the fabric of the universe is actually unraveling, and now he's got that decision to make, and it's actually the same decision, which is the meta crap of it all, right? Can you actually do both? It's like it's turtles all the way down.
Right. And if they go that direction, then I suppose what they should do in that moment, what they probably will do is have Gwen say, okay, now my empowered decision is to be the sacrificial lamb that makes this all work. And instead of being the passive bystander, Gwen Stacy, that just gets killed by you being stupid, I'm going to throw myself into the maw of the abyss in order to give everyone what they want. And everybody will feel good about that because it'll feel like a decent meta price has been paid and a decent emotional price has been paid for Miles' self-actualization. But Miles hasn't been the one that actually has to pay the price, which also feels good because he was able to do something a little different. But who knows where they'll go with it. Most people that I read seem to assume that Gwen dies. So I guess that's what I assumed walking out of the movie. Is like, I don't even know why, but obviously Gwen dies. And then I kept reading things on the internet where people were also felt the same.
We're down one fancy wristwatch.
Down one fancy wristwatch?
Yeah, if they're going to go pull Miles out of Earth 42,
Oh.
somebody's going to have to stay behind, or they're going to have to go to a different Spider-Verse.
Well, no, it just opened portals. Anyone could go through it. If one person has the watch to open the portals, you could all go through it together.
But then you need a watch to
But then you need a watch to
and-
keep from glitching.
Yeah, but all you have to do is get Miles into his own universe and he won't glitch because that's where he belongs, right?
I guess you're right, yeah.
But you are opening up the idea that maybe the sacrifice is someone has to stay in some universe.
Get left behind.
Maybe Prowler Miles is... That just sounds lame. Sorry, it's going to kill Gwen or something. But that's a little
That's
too.
stupid.
That's
No,
too much.
Gwen is the one thing they can't do, I don't think, is have Gwen die as a consequence of Miles being stupid or anything like that.
Yeah.
If Gwen's going to die, it's because Gwen makes that choice. If Gwen died as a consequence of Miles being stupid, then I think we'd all feel good.
The thing about why I even when it came to the Gwen story felt some degree of, okay, this isn't complete, I'm going to hold judgment here, is it felt as much as it was framed as dad can't reconcile his commitments to his daughter, so he's going to give up his commitments and then go from there. It also felt like a really clunky shoehorned in plot point that's going to be part of how we resolve or understand the resolution of the final story. If he's not captain, he doesn't have to die.
That could be.
Yeah.
Which was part of my assumption with how that was all sort of like layered in. And part of maybe the solution of, and maybe the part of the solution that actually reinforces Ben's point, because if Jefferson Davis if Miles and Gwen come up with a way to draw a line and make Jefferson Davis walk away from becoming captain in order to make it safe to break the canon event or whatever, it's just like, but it is too smart for it to be that clunky. But that's what it felt like, was a kind of clunky plot point pulled into this narrative to make the narrative what we wanted it to be, and also to lay in a level of gun on the wall setup, and so for a payoff. But
I just don't think they're actually that. That's a good point. I think they're not that clunky. I think what they wanted.
I mean, she has that moment. She literally says, "So you're not captain anymore?"
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's like
I remember
that moment where
that
you're
and
supposed to
thinking
be like, "Wait a minute." It's the captain that has to die, but he's not a captain, so he doesn't have to die in this story.
I think also
Yeah.
what is true, one of the reasons why I think we all feel better about judging this movie by the Gwen storyline than any of the other ones is this movie is cast as, hey, you were expecting a Miles movie. It's actually a Gwen movie. And insofar as it's a Gwen movie, it does actually tell a complete story with Gwen fully self-actualized and ready to go into battle with all her buddies. At the end, like Miles has important choices and things and hero's journey stuff ahead of him, but Gwen basically goes on a whole hero's journey in this movie and becomes the person that she needs to, and that's
That's a good point.
That's the last image of the movie. And so from that perspective, I'm like, well, it's not a Gwen. Insofar as it's a Gwen movie, it's not a Gwen movie that I feel anything but hates me and I hate it. Anything else? The other thing I'll say in favor of Ben's arguments is that we always sort of say you have to look at how the pagans are interpreting this and not be too good to be like, well, all the pagans are saying that it's this. So they do all say they are all loving the trans metaphor of it all. They all are saying like, oh man, it's so great that our kids have this anarcho-terrorist Marxist dude 60 years from now. My kids will look back on this character. And again, Lord and Miller are too smart to do that entirely stupidly the way a Feige or a Johnson would. Like, that character is played with a little irony. The joke's on him just enough that you don't feel totally assaulted as a conservative by that character. Like, he's just a little bit annoying, but he's also really cool.
Right. I remember a long time ago, I saw a movie that has nothing to do with Spider-Man. I saw that Talladega Nights movie with Will Ferrell, you know, the race car driver spoof sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the villain character is gay. And
Yes.
there's this scene where the newscasters are like doing a little reel about him and his gay lover and their dog. And the newscasters are both sort of morally horrified in a really funny way, just to let you as the viewer know, hey, we actually think this is cute and funny, but also giving you a little moral indignation so that the joke's on this guy just enough. And that
That you don't feel too bad about it.
that's right. It's all about mainstreaming, actually.
Well, that's been the
gay
whole
identity.
That's how gay identities.
That's how they do
created
everything.
Go all
made
the way
it.
back to the 20s with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Like
Right.
we're going to
That's
cast them as the villains, and you're
Yeah.
going to kind of like the villains.
That's
And then
right.
we're going to cast them as the comic relief, and you're going to laugh at them, but you're going to be accepting them as you laugh at.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
It's just,
It's so, it just works really well.
yeah. And this movie has a lot of stuff like that. That's troubling. That a narco-terrorist guy is troubling, and the pregnant lady, and just all the little things that add up to
there's a lot of it.
of a woke, whatever it is. At a certain point, when you have enough little things signaling that we hate the whole Judeo-Christian West, you kind of have to just take their word for it.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I don't know. I hope people don't hear me as being disingenuous or unwilling to choose between Ben's unvarnished hatred and Jake's enjoyment of the film. I think it's problematic. I
I was
think
pretty annoyed by the fact that we just didn't get finality so that
we could just have the real discussion.
have the real
Yeah.
discussion. Yeah.
How long do we have to wait, by the way?
a year, just a year.
Yeah. It's 2024.
Yeah.
Okay.
But apparently none of the voice work's been done on it.
And we're in the middle of this writer's strike, so
And we're in the middle of a writer's strike. But that doesn't mean it's pretty clear that they wrote what they actually did was write a 4 or 5 hour movie
Yeah.
and then decide to cut it in half.
right. I mean, the problem with the writer's strike is if I understand things correctly, when the writers are striking, I may not, as the director, like when I'm in the room with the voice actors, I can't say try this alternate line. I need a writer to write it. Now, maybe the writer writing it just means he's sitting next to me saying, "Yep," but the rules is one of the reasons why movies do just shut down, even if they have completed scripts, because most movies will have a writer, quote unquote, on set, and he'll be pitching things back and forth, and particularly with a jokey, zany, lot of moving parts movie like this or like the MCU type stuff, it's pretty hard to do. Even if you have a script that's nailed down, it's pretty hard to do without a writer. So
I think as a roller coaster ride, I was there for the full time slot and I would have been there for another hour or so to wrap it up. I was along for the ride. The only place I felt bogged down by was when we were in the lobby of Spider-Man Hotel.
yeah, I mean,
And
I
we
actually
had to like act like we cared about Peter Parker's baby and think it was funny that we didn't actually care and nobody cared, but also it was cute, but wasn't it? It was just like all that stuff was.
the writing's good in this movie. It's sharp, but it is interesting. Just a random observation. There weren't a lot of jokes that made me laugh, minus the stuff that had already been burned in the trailer, like the psychiatrist in Spider-Man or the
Get
mall
Spider-Man.
pointing.
Yeah.
There weren't like the biggest kind of unexpected sort of laugh moment was the Lego thing, and that didn't really get me personally, but I guess I was expecting usually with these guys, you're going to get something like what we felt walking out of Dungeons and Dragons, where it's just like, well, there was that one part that was delightful. That was just like, this movie didn't really have.
No, I
that.
don't remember actually laughing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I did. I was too busy
Hating.
growling
Growling.
loudly. Everyone was telling me to shut up.
Shut up, Ben. Any other thoughts on this movie? Random scenes that you liked, things that you thought were interesting, stuff that you guys...
Vulture action scene was my favorite
Vulture
of all
scene
the
was,
action.
Vulture scene was really cool. Although even there, it's like, we're in a museum. We're talking about what constitutes art.
I know.
Yeah,
But that's also Spider-Man.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Spider-Man's going to be quipping. That's just the problem.
It's quipping, but yeah, you're right. It is funny that they're like, it's not art exactly, but it is commenting on art. So that is a kind of art. Actually, that was pretty funny. That's clever stuff.
Yeah, no, as a statement of intentions, that first 20 minutes is terrific.
It's kind of
My only problem
awesome.
with it is that I'm sick
tired
to
of it.
death of women.
Doing
gymnastics. But
agreed.
and especially, I did find Gwen's whole look and just the semiotics of Gwen were more troubling this time ago. I guess I'd forgotten that she didn't actually have that haircut the first time around. But
Me too.
or she got it. You're saying halfway through or something.
What happens is Miles gets his powers, and he gets when he's introduced to her, he gets his hand caught in her hair.
That's right. Okay.
And they have to shave it off. And that's the whole plausibility behind the lesbo haircut.
Yep, I remember that. Man, these guys are good.
Yeah.
Got us
it's
again.
a level of...
Yeah,
there's levels to this stuff, and they always have one extra one.
Mm-hmm.
One more than you would think.
Yeah. I don't know if I like that, but I admire it on some level. I wish it was in the surface of good, but I suppose that's too much to hope for.
You can actually be the idiot who thinks that Gwen has her lesbian haircut to this day because she's in love with Miles Morales.
Mm-hmm.
And they could make that the text of the movie, and yet...
And those are the only arguments that I don't like. We'll release this episode and somebody will come up to me or one of us and say something like that. Guys, you could be Team Ben, you could be Team Jake, you can be Team Nathan. I don't care, but we should be having the discussion on a more sophisticated level than that, whatever that is. Just the math.
Just because they created an internal logic with a math equation that adds up to Gwen has this haircut because she's in love with Miles doesn't mean that they didn't insert the whole equation so that she can have a lesbian coded or trans-coded haircut.
Yes, as Ben was kind of saying, you're reading the lyrics, but did you listen to the music? You just read the lyrics there, and that doesn't really tell you what a song is, Bozo the Clown. So, I liked the horse Spider-Man. That was kind of fun. Did do as much with the fun.
Ask me if I like it.
Do you like it?
Nay. Sorry, I actually liked it.
I was afraid that might happen. I was like, I know where this metaverse is branching off. I wish I could take a different path. I guess I have that bad.
You're stuck.
Pure politeness. Yeah. I wish Miles still had his teenage voice. I wish the actor hadn't aged, but nothing you can do about that, I guess.
Huh.
I was actively
I didn't think it changed.
Did it not?
No,
I guess I didn't either. I thought he was already older when he did.
That's what I thought. What's his name again?
Shamik Moore, maybe?
Yeah, Shamik.
I'm curious. Let's
I'm
listen
looking
to
at
a sample.
He's 28.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so
he was 25 or something.
24, right?
24 or 25 before. His voice is more or less going to be set at 24.
I guess I just got confused because I don't know the first movie well enough. I was like, how old is this kid? He's still young enough to be grounded, I guess, but
he's in high school.
He's
15.
Yeah,
that's what
he didn't read as 15 to me with between the voice and actually the way they aged up the model.
17 or 18 was what I felt like the whole movie.
He looks.
I didn't follow the timeline.
I was aware of the fact that
works.
Was that
nothing? I was going to go back to the previous argument, but there's no need.
Ooh. Anything else, Jake? Anything else you liked or didn't like or want to draw attention to? Soundtrack was cool.
Yep.
I don't know if it had any bangers that were as immediately bangable as the first one, but
no.
Maybe they'll grow on me.
Nothing that stuck with you like What's Up Danger or Sunflower, like in terms of earworm.
Yep.
No, those are awesome earworms.
But it was cool.
Yeah.
I'm just looking over my notes here. I have nothing else to say besides go to patreon.com/sanity at the movies. You can be on Discord. You can be part of this discussion. You can be like, but he got his hand stuck in her hair. That's why she had a haircut. And we will be polite to you because you're giving us money.
But we'll resent it.
But we will resent it. Yeah. But we'll be your dancing monkeys.
We can be bought.
We can be bought. No. We have a great group.
And our price is $5 a month.
Yeah, we can be bought very cheaply. No. We have a great group of patrons. They're fun to talk about. I'm looking forward
Fun to talk about.
They're fun to talk about.
Behind their backs.
Behind their backs with the mics off. But right
Not
now
fun to
they're-
talk to. No,
Right.
we don't like that. But
Yeah, we we have a great group of patrons. They are fun to talk with. It is fun to be on Discord with them. It is fun to get their thoughts. It is fun to get their recommendations. It feels like there's some people excited about Killers of the Flower Moon on our Discord, which means it's cool and not just wanting us to review Spider-Man movies, which is great. I approve of the people on our Discord. I think you should be part of it. You go to patreon.com/sanity at the movies right now. You click a few buttons. You give some credit card information. You enter into a whole new world. That's all. There isn't any more. Goodbye. Until next time.
oh dear,
So, dear, a line from the movie?
no. I just always get caught flat-footed on these.
You got like 9 seconds. No.
This mask is my badge.
I'm starting the music again.
no.
This mask is my bad.
No. Across the Spider-Verse quotes.
Oh no, we're almost out. Okay, I'm gonna have to play it a third time, an unprecedented third time. Until next time.
Let's do things differently this time. So differently.
Nah, I'm gonna make my own podcast.
Too punk rock to give your old man a hug.